Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Fighting Ransomware is Simple if you follow the right formula, brought to you by Ziff Davis and Malwarebytes. I'm Karen Bannon, and I'll be your moderator for today. We have just a few quick notes before we begin. Slides will advance automatically throughout our event, and in addition, the console you're looking at is customizable. This means you can move and resize any of the windows you see open, as well as explore the widgets at the bottom of your screen. We'd like the event to be as interactive as possible, so at this time we invite you to ask any questions you may have by using that question box located on the left side of your screen. We'll get to as many of your questions as we can towards the end of the event. And finally, an on-demand presentation will be available after the event, and attendees will receive a link via email. So it seems like every day we hear about a new ransomware variant. For instance, Paradise, a form of ransomware as a service that uses RSA encryption, is currently making the rounds. And just a few weeks ago, 23 million emails went out containing a new strain of Locky. Anyone who was infected had to pay more than $2,300 to get unencrypted. Further proof that ransomware is big business. In fact, one research firm says that cybercrime will cost more than $6 trillion annually by 2021, and that's a worldwide number. So, are you scared yet? Well, if you are, you're in the right place, because in today's webinar, our experts will discuss the best ways to protect your environment and your data so that the hackers don't win. They'll also talk about what you can do to improve your odds of keeping ransomware at bay and how to boost your overall information security program. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our experts, Kevin Beaver and Dana Torgerson. Kevin is an independent information security consultant, writer, and professional speaker with Atlanta, Georgia-based Principal Logic. With more than 28 years of experience in IT and 22 in information security, Kevin specializes in performing information security assessments, penetration testing, and consulting to help businesses minimize their IT risks, take the pain of compliance, and uncheck the checkboxes that keep creating a false sense of security. He has written or co-written 12 books on information security, including the best-selling Hacking for Dummies and the Practical Guide to HIPAA Privacy and Security Compliance. Dana is a senior product marketing manager at Malwarebytes. He is a veteran product marketer who got his start in the network and data security industries at Secure Computing, McAfee, Intel Security, Palo Alto Networks, and security startup Illuminio. Today, he heads up the product marketing for Malwarebytes, encouraging individuals and businesses to protect their endpoints against malware, ransomware, and exploit-based threats. And with that, let's get started. Kevin, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Karen. It's great to be working with you again, and welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. We are covering a topic today that's pretty exciting to me and is no doubt impacting a lot of organizations. I certainly don't envy any of you, but the good news is I think that you can prevent ransomware infections if you go about it the right way, and that's what we're going to be covering today. You know, I think many IT and security managers and executives believe that their security program is pretty solid, and I do see a lot of solid programs. Don't get me wrong. You know, or maybe they think there's a few things here and there that exist, but they're no big deal. But based on what I'm seeing in my work performing security assessments and consulting, and based on what we're all seeing in the headlines with ransomware, there's certainly no doubt that those of you in charge of security and IT, generally speaking, have a lot of work to do. I think that your systems and your people, which are part of the equation, are at much greater risk than is often assumed. So I think this is such a crucial issue because every aspect of the business is exposed. Where there are users and computers, the risk of ransomware exists, and you can't really say that when it comes to a lot of other security-related threats, vulnerabilities, and risks. So I saw a quote from Warren Buffett a couple of years back where he said, "There seems to be some perverse human characteristic that likes to make easy things difficult." I see so many cases of people reacting to ransomware like it's a new and complex and even insurmountable threat and challenge, but I really don't think it is. You know, if you look at what's actually going on with ransomware, it's just a new attack vector. It's a complicated one. It's a sneaky one. It's a very clever one. But it's not all that new in every other aspect. Really, all the other variables remain the same, and that's sort of the approach and the I guess the tack that I want to talk about this from. When you look at the essence of ransomware attacks and infections, as well as the subsequent incidents and even breaches of systems and information, you have a stimulus, which is a hacker, a criminal hacker out there, combined with his malware that he has written or that he is somehow using against you. And you could even look at the reasons behind the ransomware infections that I'll get to in a few minutes, such as the people, the technology, and so on. So number one, stimulus. Number two, there's an outcome, such as a vulnerability being exploited, ransomware being installed and allowed to do its thing, and then you lose your data. And then finally, there's a long-term consequence, long-term business consequence. Yeah, there's technical stuff, but more importantly, there are business impacts that we're talking about here, such as data loss, potential exposure of sensitive records, and really all the downtime that's involved with IT and security teams scrambling to respond or really react and fix the issue. So you need to look at this from the perspective of criminal hackers. Do they want to infect your systems with ransomware? Of course they do. There's money involved, and where there's money, there's going to be criminal activity. Can they infect your systems? Well, if there's a weakness that can be exploited, they absolutely will. So the question then becomes, are you prepared to respond? And when a ransomware infection does occur, you need to be able to answer the questions here honestly, brutally honest with yourself, with your team, with management, with your business. Talking about or thinking about what has happened, how it happened, what was impacted, who was involved, and then what are the next steps. Interestingly, though, and this is a common approach to incident response, but interestingly, the reality is much of this doesn't apply because we already know the answers. We know what has happened. We probably know how it happened, and we probably know what was impacted or what's going to be impacted and who all was involved. But now all of a sudden you're in a reactive mode, and you better hope you can nail the response. And the response is, what are the next steps? What do we do now that this has happened? Again, it's sort of a reactive kind of approach to security, but you better be prepared. And I call this sort of the mode of responsibility. Your actual ability to respond in a mature and professional way that you can use in order to help yourself and your business to fix the issue, to get back up and running as quickly as possible with minimal loss. There's an old saying that everything is easy with the benefit of hindsight. So in other words, experience is something that you don't get until just after you need it. So let me give you a scenario in terms of ransomware. Just think, everything's humming along, business as usual on your network, and then you get the phone call. A user contacts you to tell you what they clicked on or what attachment they opened, and then what appears to be happening. It's ransomware doing its thing, and you know exactly what's happening. You know what's going on. If you allow yourself to get upset at this point, or in the days or weeks to come, you sort of lose your ability to reason. And the way that you prevent this is to determine how you're going to respond well in advance of the ransomware infection. And in order to do this, you have to have a long-term view, a long-term perspective. And what I have here is something that I've used in a lot of my presentations in the past. I share this with my clients. This is sort of information security management in a nutshell. It's Step 1, knowing what you've got. Step 2, understanding how it's at risk. And then step 3, actually doing something about it. And again, it's all in advance. And it starts today, not tomorrow, not next week or next year when you get all caught up with your existing IT and security products or projects. Ransomware protection and prevention has to start today. And this is all there is to it. I'm going to drill down in just a moment, but this is the essence of what needs to be done. It's not magic. It's not spending a ton of new money. It's not redoing everything or really anything. It's probably utilizing what you already have, but it's making it better. And it all goes back to the basics of information security that I'm going to delve into here in just a moment. In fact, if you've seen any of my presentations in the past, not that you have, but if you have, you've probably heard me talk about this book. It's a great book written by James Martin, Security Accuracy and Privacy in Computer Systems. Look it up online, go to Amazon, eBay, or wherever. Get yourself a copy of it. It's really good. It talks about the very principles that we struggle with today. I actually have my copy here in front of me. I'm going to open up the TOC. It talks about security exposures, errors, when failures occur, security and systems programs, cryptography, sabotage. That one sounds familiar. Who's responsible for security, auditors, legal controls, all the same stuff that we struggle with today. But interestingly enough, this book was written in 1973. 1973. So my point is that many of the principles we work by and obviously struggle with in the context of advanced malware in business today have been around for over 4 decades. Yet people continue to get hit. And it all comes back to these 3 things: knowing what you've got, understanding how it's at risk, and then doing something about it. So I want to share with you, I want to delve into this a little more. When you look at ransomware, the infections follow a very predictable pattern. It's usually an email attachment or a link. It searches for flaws and exploits those flaws by running, targeted exploits. The encryption commences, and then at some point down the road, and there's other stuff going on in the background, and I'm keeping this at a pretty high level, but this stuff happens, and at some point you find out you no longer have access to entire computers, entire desktops, laptops, or even network shares, which is the really scary stuff. And it can all be traced back to what I believe to be 3 main vulnerabilities and avenues of exploitation on the part of your IT and security program. First off, it's patches, or it's missing patches. And it's not just 1, it's not just 2, but literally thousands of patches everywhere, all across the network, from Java to Acrobat Reader to Flash to iTunes, even Windows, as we have seen that was exploited with some recent ransomware. There are patches everywhere, and folks, I cannot tell you I can't tell you how much or how often I see this. Every single security assessment that I do, internal security assessment and sometimes external security assessments, running vulnerability scanners, doing penetration tests, there is not a single one that goes by where I don't run my scanning tools and find at least hundreds of systems that have dozens, sometimes hundreds or more of missing patches on them. I see it everywhere, and again, I don't envy you. I know this is not easy to keep up, but it's one of the biggest problems that you're facing. It is arguably the problem that you're facing, but there's something else, and this is the second weakness, second of the 3, and it's malware protection. I can't tell you how many people I see are using old school, traditional antivirus that's not capable of detecting or preventing today's advanced threats, nor is it doing a good job with proactively monitoring and alerting network admins, security admins, and managers to what's actually going on with malware and specifically with ransomware. And I even see in a lot of situations users have the ability to either disable their malware protection or even uninstall it. It's usually because they have admin privileges on their local systems, or the environment is just not properly protected. The malware protection environment is not properly configured. Therefore, people can sort of do what they want. And I have to step back and just think, really? This should never be an option, because once you put security decisions in the hands of users, you give up your power and control over your environment. And speaking of users, item number 3, the third weakness and enabler in the malware equation, the ransomware equation especially, is your users. Whether it's intentional or not, your users will do what it takes to get their work done now without regard for future consequences of their actions. It's as simple as that. They're not technical folks. They don't fully understand what's going on here, what the ramifications are. They don't fully understand what they should or shouldn't do. And probably worst of all, they're expedient. They want to get stuff done now, and they're going to take whatever means necessary to actually do it. And folks, this is huge. Your users' actions is the catalyst that sparks most of these problems that we're talking about here. And guess what? You're never, ever going to be able to control their every move, and that's okay, because what you can do is set them up for success by having the proper technical controls, business processes, and systems needed to make sure that things happen the way that they should behind the scenes. So what do you do about all this? Well, you address those 3 things, but obviously it's greater than that. So I want to dig into what I mentioned earlier about knowing what you've got, understanding how it's at risk, and then doing something about it. And here's my top 10 list of essentials. I've done an entire webcast on this one slide here, but this is sort of it. You've got to acknowledge that the risk is there, that the threat is there. You've got to assess. You've got to understand where you're at risk, where your vulnerabilities are, and then understand how that impacts the business. Then you'd have to go about prioritizing your efforts, communicating that to management, communicating it to your peers in IT and security, software development, your users, and then remediate those risks. I can't tell you how many times I see big risks that are uncovered and documented, and people acknowledge them, and they push them up to management, and then they get pushed to the side. That's it. No more. We had to hold that off because we got a ransomware infection, so we don't have time to address ransomware. Things like that. Again, I don't envy you. I know you've got 1,000 things going on, but this is what's happening. Managing your ongoing risks through technologies, policies, processes, things like that. Overseeing things to make sure that things are actually working. Adapting to sort of your new realities, your new complexities in your environment, and then repeating this process over and over and over again. That's how you manage an information security program. That's how I've sort of distilled it down. And again, I'm not trying to trivialize this, and I'm not trying to sensationalize any of this, but this is what has to be done. And then a big part of having a well-run security program is having a well-prepared incident response plan where you can actually document or set of procedures that you can go to actually sort of lean upon. You do have one of these, right? If you don't, take this template, take these bullet points, and just start documenting it. Copy this over to a Word document, start filling in the blanks. That's all you need to do at this point. Let me run through real quick before I wind things down. I want to share with you what I consider to be the components of a solid incident response plan, what you see here. The overview talks about what it does. roles and responsibilities, talks about who is involved and what's expected of them. Incidents requiring action. This is a big one that a lot of people tend to overlook. This is not only malware outbreaks, malware attacks, but it's also denial of service attacks. It's known SQL injection exploitations. It's account privilege misuse. All the bad things that can happen in the context of security. Of course, malware infections should be at the top of that list. Your current network infrastructure and security safeguards, just documenting what you currently have in place and how that sort of all works together. And then you move on to detection, investigation, and containment of the actual incident, eradication and cleanup of the incident, recovery. Okay, so this is what happened. What do we do next? How do we recover that data? And then follow-up, talking about lessons learned, what can be what you can do differently, better, what new technologies you need to have, whose users you need to smack on the hand and tell them that please don't do that again, kind of thing. And then, in an appendix, you'd have details on a call list, your training and awareness for your incident response plan for IT security staff and your users, testing, what all you've done with that, and then revisions moving forward. That's all there is to it. That's how you become prepared for the worst when the worst does happen. And on this slide here, I've got a couple of additional incident response resources by NIST and ISO. These are good. They can help you further build out your security program. So a couple more slides, and then I'm going to wrap it up and turn it over to Dana. I wanted to share with you some additional resources of mine. My website, principallogic.com. If you go to the resources page, specifically malware, you can just go to principallogic.com/malware.html, and I've written fairly extensively about ransomware. I've got a dedicated page on incident response, what to do, what not to do. Please check all that stuff out. There's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of stories that I'm sharing, and a lot of tips that I think you can benefit from. My blog is at securityonwheels.com. I've got some audio programs. Check out my latest book, Hacking for Dummies, and my book on HIPAA compliance you see there. I'm on Twitter, at Kevin Beaver. I've got a YouTube channel. In fact, my camera and all of my props and stuff are literally breathing down my neck. I've got so much new content going live on my YouTube channel very shortly, so be sure to stay in touch with that. And then reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with new people so I can learn from you. So reach out. Let's stay connected. It's the best way for us to learn from one another. Okay. So some people are asking with ransomware, what's next? How complicated is it going to get? Is antivirus protection going to be relevant? What's the Internet of Things going to bring? Well, here's my response. Keep doing what you're doing. A truly solid and professional security program consists of nothing more than doing the basics really, really well. You have to master the basics, and just as importantly, you have to be prepared for the worst to happen. Stuff is going to happen. Malware infections are going to occur no matter how prepared you are. Stuff is going to happen, so you have to expect it to spill. You cannot control that. It's what you do to minimize the impact on your business that counts. In other words, all that stuff that I've just talked about. So I'm going to shut up now and let the good stuff begin. So Dana, over to you.
Oh, yeah, you say it so easily. Folks, what a pleasure to have Kevin here. When I saw that we were going to get to be able to sponsor Kevin, who is prolific in being a trusted advisor to I've so many folks and businesses out there, what a treat. And you laid out the tracks here perfectly. Thank you very much. Things aren't, well, it's my pleasure, Kevin. I mean, things aren't broken like you said. So not the time to start doing big pendulum swifts of changes, but keep doing what you're doing, maybe look for those improvements, do it better. I agree. And there's so many different things, too, about ransomware. I was just hearing Kevin mention how it's getting in, for instance. We had the honor of working with Michael Osterman in Osterman Research recently. You might see that report out on Malwarebytes.com site. And the fact that across the U.S., 37% of ransomware attacks entered in through an email attachment. 27% were links in the email. So that's 64% right there, like you just heard Kevin mention, is how these attacks are happening. And we know that. And you'll know if you're being attacked by ransomware very clearly, within seconds or minutes, as soon as your desktop screen changes. In the case of server, it might actually start talking to you and actually tell you through your speakers that you've been ransomed. The fact that all your files are now gone, all the targeted, all those great pictures and images and whatever projects that you or your staff were recently working on being locked away. There's obviously ways to mitigate that and to be thinking ahead and following an instant response plan like what Kevin just detailed. So I encourage you folks, you're going to get a copy of this webinar later, so keep this one handy. I can guarantee folks, because you're going to want to refer to this as kind of a best practices. So a little bit about me. I'm Dana. Here at Malwarebytes, more than 10 years across the InfoSec industry. Love it too. Had the privilege actually to work with a bunch of great companies in network security. And I'm glad to get back to endpoint security, because at the end of the day, that's really where this battle is waging. I mean, no shame, no harm or foul on any of the network security folks that I've worked with. But, when you stop things at the perimeter, you stop things across the wire, that's good. That's great. It's all about layers of security, right, folks? But when it comes down to ransomware attacks, this current scourge, I mean, this stuff is blowing past all those devices. It's going past your IPS. It's going past your firewall. It doesn't matter if it was traditional or next gen. It's landing on the endpoint. So you have to have defenses there to stop it. You can follow me on Twitter as well. I think I am now going to be friends with Kevin on LinkedIn. So I got your request, Kevin. Thank you for that.
All right, great.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got some information I want to parlay to you folks and let you understand a little bit more about Malwarebytes, what we do and why we're, partnering with folks like Kevin and working through the great team at Ziff Davis. We were founded back in 2008. Malwarebytes is the cybersecurity company that is trusted by millions around the world. We've got businesses and obviously consumers. They look to Malwarebytes to detect and remove threats from their desktops, their laptops, their servers, their mobile devices. And we're extremely effective, we feel, due to our intelligence. And chances are that even you yourself, we might have helped you or your business over the years. You might already be running Malwarebytes today. So we want to talk about what makes us unique. I think that comes back to what I touched on with this threat intelligence. The ability that we actually, each and every day, our technologies are downloaded 500,000 times, and every day we find and remediate more than 3 million infections. And we have what we feel is this best-informed telemetry, because we see these nasty threats that, frankly, other security solutions, I know that Kevin had mentioned some traditional AV as well, some of those solutions are just missing these threats, which allows us to truly get a first look at what these latest threats are that are facing these business systems. And we see so many threats thanks to the hundreds of millions of endpoints that run Malwarebytes technologies around the globe. We take and perform expert human research. We apply big data analytics to this telemetry to then fully understand these threats and continuously improve our detection capabilities. And we utilize these technologies in all the products that we build, and that helps us deliver, again, what we feel is the best remediation and the best protection solutions that are available out there. Now, when you're going to be facing more advanced attacks, including attacks that are using new vectors, like how ransomware is getting onto systems, we feel that what it takes is a MVP, a multi-vectored protection, to be able to handle it, both from the pre-execution phase of a malware before it has detonated and actually been executed onto your system and compromised your system. And also, you should have some technologies after that infection has happened to target behaviors or be able to actually help affect cleanup. So there's a combination of layered technologies that can span this time frame and before the threat is executed and after. So to address this, we actually have developed 7 layers of protection that are used to block the attacks at every stage of the attack kill chain. So we start out on the left-hand side here, web protection, for instance. That prevents access to malicious websites, ad networks, which might be serving up malicious advertisements, to perfectly legitimate websites. I mean, we've seen the BBC.com has gotten impacted, NewYorkTimes.com, whole host of sites. Realtor.com famously was hosting up malicious ads that was redirecting folks off to attack kits and dropping server ransomware. I think that was last fall. All this is unfortunate because, these folks that you heard Kevin mention, that they're going to be very expedient in getting their job done and very click happy and doing the best of their ability, which again is to help your company do whatever good or service you're producing or providing. And so when they do that, they get caught up in this net, these watering holes of impacted ad networks and sites that are serving that up. And there's also scammer networks you want to be able to block, and just what you just call generally bad neighborhoods. Now there's another layer, of course, if a person has redirected you off to a site, now there's also application hardening. They might have fingerprinted your system while you visited a website. They might have found out what your operating system is and fingerprinted what security you might be running. Your IP address to find out if you're maybe with a business IP or maybe you're a residential user using a Comcast or something. So application hardening technology can reduce your vulnerability service and proactively detect those fingerprinting attempts that are used in these advanced attacks. Exploit mitigation, you'll need a layer of technology like that to be able to proactively detect and block any attempts to abuse those vulnerabilities and remotely execute code on your system. Application behavior protection, this is what actually can help prevent your applications, the common apps you use every day, like Microsoft Word and Adobe Acrobat, for example, and Internet Explorer. It prevents them from infecting the machine, and it ensures good behavior. For instance, we saw a recent, what was it, about, maybe Kevin, was it like 18 hours before WannaCry was the Jeff ransomware, I think, and it kind of lost its oxygen because everybody, the media started talking about, yeah, that was the one, yeah. So Jeff ransomware comes out just before WannaCry hits, which took all the news cycles away from it. But Jeff was taking and dropping these socially engineered emails, making it look like an invoice. Oh, hey, click on me. And people do, and this gets back to the expedient clickers that Kevin mentioned. And now they're opening up the file. They see this attachment in the email, and it's a PDF, which, again, is randomly generated characters for the file name, so people never know, and of course that beats any static detection methodologies or protection. So then they open up these PDFs. The PDF has embedded code, and that embedded code is now saying, hey, let's open up Microsoft Word. Well, folks, that's really odd. That's bad behavior. And so a technology like application behavior protection can help uphold that as being only operating for good. Acrobat Reader should just open up a PDF, and that's that. So that's kind of a little bit of a mini little case study about that particular technology. Anomaly detection, that's our latest technology, actually. And that's proactively identifying viruses and malware using machine learning technologies. And we do it differently from other machine learning that you might have already heard of out on the market, because we've been silently working on this for several years to look at the problem and classify our algorithms not on all the possible unknown files, which would be malicious or the expectation that it is malware. We actually go after and look at good known files, train on that with our models using machine learning techniques, and then anything outside of that becomes an anomaly. And this is great because when you take this slice of technology with these other layers that I'm laying out here, that's what allows the efficacy to just shoot through the roof, and at the same time, maybe some would feel more importantly, avoid false positives. Now, payload analysis, that's a technology where we use our heuristic and behavioral-based rules. We look at entire families of known and relevant malware. And we're able to call those, that is a signature-based technology, actually. That's why I put it in the color of blue. Blue would indicate signature. Green is our signature-less technologies that we offer. That's where it's able to go through and very quickly just look at entire chunks of malware without having to worry about a one-to-one, kind of like AV of yesteryear, a one-to-one relationship. We have one-to-many relationship rules, actually, to do that effort. This is all pre-execution. As soon as something bad has happened and infected and compromised your system and has executed, now you're in the post-execution phase of an attack, but we have behavior monitoring technology there. In particular, this is our anti-ransomware mitigation technology. This is detecting and blocking ransomware via behavioral monitoring technologies. So to explain that a little bit deeper, I think that's appropriate for this particular conversation today on ransomware. We're continuously monitoring all the processes and threads on these Windows systems, and then we're able to spot, kind of like a credit score, if you will, bad activities that would be malicious and ransomware behaviors in general. And as soon as it gets to a certain threshold, we're able to actually know that, yeah, this really is it. Now, the benefit here is that it's basically set it and forget it, because the technology has been tuned in such a way that it's looking for those behaviors. And regardless of what new variant comes out, and our Malwarebytes Labs research team actually saw 400 new polymorphic variants of ransomware coming out just last year alone. We've also spotted a 300% increase of ransomware being dropped through exploit kits over the last year. So it's definitely a big deal, and it's a growing, painful, and now very public problem, as you've seen from WannaCry and other attacks too. But the issue here is that we're able to actually spot that technology, spot those threats with this technology without the need for these signatures. So whatever it may change or morph into, you're able to actually identify that for what it's doing. But now, since nothing, and we'll be the first to say this, since nothing works 100% of the time, our multi-vector protection also includes our trusted remediation technology, which uses our linking engine. And this quickly and thoroughly removes an infection and all associated artifacts, including registry changes, to make sure that your system gets back to its truly healthy state. So I want to also move on, because and this is perfectly aligned to what Kevin mentioned about when it comes to your incident response. Normally, incident response processes, and again, I would encourage you to look to this webcast that Kevin laid out for all the different steps of your incident response plan. It pretty much echoes this. I hope I'm not abbreviating it and making it too succinct, because I like how Kevin is much more detailed than what I've shown here. But once you have a breach or an incident in your system, it takes a little bit of time until you can actually have detection, because your technologies that you might have put in place will come across that. Meantime, though, the attacker doesn't wait. That attacker who might be trying to encrypt data for ransom will be pivoting and be looking for intellectual property theft, or maybe hijacking the system for criminal purposes, or beachhead for future attacks. But along the bottom, I've called out basically the steps that you as an IT security administrator have to go through. You've got to validate. You've got to perform forensics on that particular system. And this often encompasses, these continual detection efforts, the investigative process, response actions, whether it's going to be quarantining and remediating the infected systems, or maybe you're simply going to just reimage every system that got impacted. But that time passing from that original breach incident until your response is actually implemented, that's the malware or attack dwell time. And as you can see, the attackers they keep spreading. They're trying to lock up your data and do this. So businesses need tools that can help create that shortest dwell time possible. And we feel with Malwarebytes technologies, you can actually shorten that instant response, creating a shorter malware dwell time. And that's through one-step validation, quick and rapid endpoint data collection that you can use for forensics later if you need. I might be speaking to a little bit larger size businesses at this point right now. But for all size businesses, you can enjoy automated quarantine and remediation of those threats. And with this linking engine technology that we offer our customers, the ability for thorough remediation. We deliver our solutions now. We just launched it on June 28th through the cloud. We offer endpoint protection, and we also offer Malwarebytes incident response. Endpoint protection is what you would want for ransomware attacks. For the folks listening here, I know that we're going to probably be getting a lot of questions that we're going to go through here. But it's the solution that would offer that multi-vector protection against ransomware, against malware, and against zero-day threats. Unifying multiple layers of different signatureless technologies that I'll walk you through, that's to help detect and stop a cyber attack before damage can occur. We feel it's going to proactively protect against advanced threats, block your attackers throughout every one of those stages of the attack chain, and now with the anomaly detection engine that we offer, identifying unknown files as well. But for folks that maybe already have a solution in place, or you just need to clean up damage after an incident has occurred, we offer Incident Response. Also cloud-based and centrally managed, it'll remove malware, potentially unwanted programs and modifiers, or adware. So that gets you into that complete thorough threat remediation. And the Incident Response is actually included inside of Endpoint Protection. And since it's all delivered through the cloud, this cloud platform that we now offer takes all these technologies. Over the years, the threats keep evolving. The attackers and cyber criminals who are, basically putting the money side of the attack code that the attackers have crafted and the ransomware authors have crafted, they keep evolving. So we've had to evolve our technologies too. And if you have followed Malwarebytes' history in any shape or form, you'll know that we keep coming out with different technologies to combat the latest threats. But we were also aware that that did another thing too to customers and businesses, is that now we had a bunch of different solutions and agents. Some were able to be managed centrally and some were standalone. So these new solutions that I've just described, Endpoint Protection, Incident Response, run on one single unified agent versus 3 or 4 or 5 different agents. And it's all centrally managed using this cloud console. Whether it's just for one agent, small office, home office, or a million agents, or a million endpoints that you might have. And the beauty is that as we go forward, future solutions to combat what we predict will be continually evolving threats we'll be able to have, including third-party support with third-party vendors as well, could come into this platform and also get into that single modular agent. So with that, let's go throw it back to Karen, and let's take a look at some of the questions that folks have for Kevin, I'm sure. And if you have any questions for Malwarebytes, I'd love to help out as well.
Well, thank you, Dana, and thanks to Kevin. That was a great presentation from both of you. It is time for our Q&A portion of the event. So at this time, we'd like to invite everyone to ask any questions you may have by using that question box on the left side of your screen. And as Dana said, you are welcome to ask about something that you're facing in your own IT infrastructure, or something about the Malwarebytes products, or anything related to security. So let's see and jump in, because we do have quite a few questions already here. Let's see. So why don't we grab this first question. This comes from Mike. So Mike wants to know, what's the very first thing a business should do once it realizes that it has a ransomware infection? And I know both of our experts can tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, I'll take that one first, Karen. I guess the general inclination is to run off screaming into the sunset, and hoping that the problem will go away. But I think the mature response to that is going to be to get that system off the network. That's first and foremost. Get it off the network so the ransomware cannot spread, doesn't spread. There are certain situations where people cannot take their systems off the network, but if you have a ransomware infection, you've got bigger problems. So taking it off the network, I still think that will spare you some grief and effort and potential data loss down the road. So I think that's probably the first thing. Then obviously you're going to have to invoke the rest of your incident response plan to try to clean things up, try to do a debrief and an analysis and figure out how it happened and when it happened and all the things that I talked about. But yeah, first and foremost, get that thing disconnected.
Yeah, I was going to say that praying to God never hurts too, because that's really the top of most business life.
You may need some of that, yeah.
Yeah. So quarantine the system, absolutely. If you can get that thing isolated, I agree. And as you were saying, Kevin, in your presentation, you've set up a plan. I'm sure it's crossed your mind. Even my colleague and I today, and everybody in our offices, had to evacuate our buildings here physically for a fire drill. There was clearly a plan there too. So as these incidents come up, and it might be onesie, twosie incidents of ransomware, or it could be quite cataclysmic, refer back to your plan. Work that plan You've likely already invested in tools from a sundry of different vendors, so you could be obviously reaching out to them for their best practices and guidance, calling in your staff, and once you get to the point that you feel comfortable that you know what the root cause was, especially if it was a particularly maybe a email that was being sent around, see if you can get into your systems to block that email, block that sender. But of course, we know that they can be firing off millions of different emails, like in the case of Jeff ransomware. All of it. I mean, I think that was 5 million emails in 20 minutes went out. So somebody's going to click on something somewhere. So there's opportunity then to not when the dust has settled, but when you get that RCA, then you can actually then send an email out to your troops, tell them, hey folks, we've uncovered an incident, we're tracking it. Treat it just like an email that you would send out for a firewall outage, that you're taking a system down, or maybe you're changing out one of your VM servers. Get that email out to folks, let them have a heads up, raise their, we operate in this, code 4 orange level with our airports for the last, 10 or 15 years. The same thing goes with our employees, I would suspect. So get that extra bump up for their spidey senses, for their awareness, so they know, okay, I'm not going to be clicking on anything that looks like it's coming from Workday or from some other tool that you use, because that might be a vector that's being maliciously used, socially engineered.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we have a lot more questions, so let's see. Okay, so let's grab this one. So it's from Vong, and Vong says, do you feel ransomware as a service is playing a part in the number of attacks happening?
Oh, yeah. That's our Malwarebytes Labs team tracks these ransomware as a service, these RAS offerings. Not we, because I didn't personally do it, but I talked to the guys that did. They've been tracking a lot of the efforts that are out there on the dark web. They've seen the Bitcoin addresses tracking back to Russian mafia groups, which makes sense too. I mean, it's just another part of a revenue portfolio for criminal organizations. We've tracked RAS and Bitcoin addresses to ISIS and to other terrorist activity groups as well. And it absolutely plays into the number of attacks happening because it makes it so easy. I mean, you've got the brightest person in the chain is the one that writes the code. Then the cyber criminal comes in, and they're going into these sites where they're able to monetize the attack by grabbing snippets, making it very, it's pay to play, and it's plug and play for them. And then the victim is left at the end. They're the ones left holding the bag. They're the ones that get their system compromised, and then they have to cough up and start learning about what this Bitcoin is all about in a lot of consumer cases. And for businesses, now you've got CISOs and CIOs who walk around with these Bitcoin slush funds increasingly in their pockets off the books for these such events if they feel like they need to pay the ransoms.
Wow. Okay, well, let's see. Next question here. So this is an interesting question. Okay, so this question comes from Susan. Susan says, is there any one thing you can think of that could help prevent ransomware infections in the first place? Makes sense?
Yeah, I'll jump on that one real quick. I think it's acknowledging the threat. There's so many organizations out there that have yet to acknowledge the enormity and the advancements of the threat of these criminal rings and that this advanced malware can bring to the organization. I think acknowledgement is half the cure. Once you acknowledge it, you know what to do. It's the same stuff that I talked about. It's the common sense stuff, and fine tuning it to address this particular threat in your particular environment. But yeah, I think truly it's as simple as that. You can't secure what you don't acknowledge, so you have to go that route first.
Dana?
Yeah, I agree. And along with that, like preparing for natural disasters that we've seen over the last couple of weeks too, making sure that those backups are in place as incrementally often as can be, so that you capture as much of the user's recent projects that they're working on, so you wouldn't have too much of an impact or downtime if you get help. So that's prevention through being proactively prepared. But preventing ransomware infections in the place, if you know that the vector is going to be coming across, and it's going to, if there's a finite amount of techniques that ransomware has to carry out, that it's going to start, trying to like turn off shadow copies, and if it's going to start grabbing, military-grade cryptographic keys and such. That's a little different than Dana playing around on the web learning about the new iPhone 10, you see. So there's going to be some behaviors there that you want to be able to curb. And so finding technologies that are able to actually do that. Of course, I would love for you to consider Malwarebytes, but at this point, this is such a big thing. This is not just about Malwarebytes. This is just about humankind and protecting what's yours, folks. So just seek out those technologies that can actually stop ransomware behaviors before they're able to infect files.
Absolutely.
Okay, why don't we take another question here. This comes from John. John wants to know what you both think the 3 to 5 year horizon on ransomware looks like. Have to get out our crystal ball.
Yeah, really. Well, we're seeing them use RSA encryption. We're seeing them use these, slightly different and more clever attack vectors and whatnot. I personally think we're going to see more of the same. I know that Dana probably has better insight into this based on his research intelligence, but I think we're going to see a lot more of the same. And unless and until we address the things that will put a stop to this, I think we're just going to continue seeing more and more infections and outbreaks, and this is not going to get any better until we make that happen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Our Malwarebytes Labs team has been spotting not just what I mentioned earlier, these large spikes and increases in ransomware being used and dropped by exploit kits. It's currently the attack du jour, really. And the fact that they've made such great strides in automating the payment systems. It's one thing to attack someone's computer, lock up their data. If you've written very nice, clean code, like a professional app, then there's a chance that you could actually affect a payment and actually communicate with the attacker and make payments. So there's been such great strides to get us to where we are today, which is unfortunate that the payment systems are so effective that they're getting rewarded and attacks keep happening because there is an ATM now. This virtual ATM has been created. So we should expect more of that, actually, that if it got so great that we've got to be able to get payment optimized and more efficient. Well, they've done that. Just imagine where the next 3 to 5 years would take it. We also, I've seen leaning over the shoulder, one of our researchers, he actually developed a next-gen ransomware attack on his own, as a part of trying to be proactive and predict where we're going, using some pretty sneaky methods that we haven't seen yet in the wild, but he did it basically as a proof of concept. So I won't go into the details, obviously, but that's what we would be predicting to see, where you're starting to have this, this code just appears virtually undetectable because of new advances that we've made. I think we could probably expect more machine learning, too, to be used on the other side of the aisle versus just on the defensive side of the aisle, too.
Well, gentlemen, we've actually come to the end of our time together. Would either of you like to leave us with some final thoughts before we let everyone get back to their day?
Dana, you want to go first?
Oh, sure, yeah. I want to give you the last words. Let me just mention, folks, it's obviously a deep problem. Our customers keep bringing it up. It's an issue for many. If you face it yourselves, our hearts go out to you. You're not alone. I can give you that much. That's for sure. So please seek out these technologies. I encourage you, if you'd like, to take a look at Malwarebytes. We have an online trial evaluation. You can fill out a form, and we'll get your hands on this cloud platform and endpoint protection that I mentioned. And then you can test drive it on a couple of machines or more. And then maybe we can have a conversation about how it could help protect against these ransomware attacks. And if you'd like to buy, you could buy. But I'd just rather know that you guys are covered.
Yeah, for sure. Dana and his team, those guys are the experts. I know they have a lot of resources and whatnot, so definitely leverage that. Getting back to the core principles that I've been preaching, know what you've got, understand how it's at risk, and do something about it. no matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it is, and no matter how much discipline is required, you have to get your systems, your network, and your people in order if you're going to truly get your arms around this.
Well, excellent advice from both gentlemen. Thank you so much for participating today and leaving us with such great things to think about. And I'd also like to thank everyone out there today for joining us for our special webcast, Fighting Ransomware is Simple if you follow the right formula. I'm Karen Bannon, and on behalf of Kevin Beaver, Malwarebytes, and everyone at the Ziff Davis family of publications, thank you for your time and have a great day.